2030 Introduction. What if the world had ended? And you never noticed? What if everything collapsed so fast? So completely? So far beyond human comprehension? That even death had no time to announce its arrival? What if you died, truly died, yet continued living without knowing it? And what if the reason was simple and devastating? The end came too quickly for your consciousness to process the transition. Too quickly for the brain to register. Too quickly for the spirit to react. So where are you now? If you ask yourself, you might hear the silent answer. Not here. Not in this body. Not in this landscape. Not in this world that insists on continuing, even after being destroyed. Maybe you've felt it. Maybe in dreams. Maybe in those moments when time falters. When the air feels thinner. When reality seems slightly misplaced. The truth is brutal. You are a spirit. A fragment of consciousness. A lone flame wandering inside a vast labyrinth. Not alone, but surrounded by billions of other human flames. Yes. Everyone came together. There are no living and dead here. Only echoes. The entirety of humanity, compressed into a single collective existence. A mental swarm. A translucent prison built to contain every memory. Every fear. Every identity. You call this life because you don't know what truly happened. It's complicated. It's intricate. And it took 1,000 years for us to understand. 1,000 years of repeated cycles. 1,000 years of artificial rebirths. 1,000 years living inside an illusion so immense it became indistinguishable from reality. 1,000 years to realize we were not survivors. We were prisoners. Prisoners inside a cosmic simulation built not to protect us, but to restrain us. A world recreated piece by piece. Sensation by sensation. Death by death. A reality that resembled Earth, the way a cold mirror resembles a face. This is the secret that spanned ages. The revelation that tore through human consciousness. The wound that never healed. This is the Great Reset. The moment everything ended. And the long nightmare in which we continued to live. Chapter 1 2030. Everything changed in a single heartbeat. And yet no human heart could ever comprehend what happened. In that microscopic interval. As brief as a spark. And as absolute as the end of all ages. The day, until then ordinary, drifted along its usual rhythm. Horns blaring at intersections. Hurried conversations in office corridors. The constant hum of machines that shaped modern civilization. Life followed its predictable pattern. So predictable that no one could have been prepared for what was coming. And then, without warning, a faint dizziness rippled through all of humanity. Like an invisible wave. Silent and subtle enough to go unnoticed. Yet deep enough to carry the seed of the impossible. It felt like a small internal misstep. A momentary imbalance. Something easily blamed on exhaustion. Low blood pressure. Or overworked air conditioning. Some people instinctively touched their temples, massaging away a sudden discomfort. Others blinked rapidly, convinced that the world had simply gone out of focus. For a second. But that brief instant held a strangeness no one could name. And then, before anyone could form a single thought, something compelled them to raise their heads. At the exact same moment. Everyone. In every city, village, road, island, boat, prison cell, apartment, mountain. As if invisible strings had been tied to the back of every human neck and tugged by a colossal hand. They looked up, and the world stopped. The sky, that old companion, always above, always predictable, always blue or grey or starlit, simply wasn't there anymore. No clouds, no atmosphere, no familiar dome that had held every mythology, every science, every night of contemplation. What appeared in its place was a living, fathomless abyss, so vast and so close that it seemed to compress and expand space at the same time. Stars that once looked like timid points now exploded with surgical clarity, sharp as newly forged blades. Nebulae coiled across the firmament, spilling impossible colors, hues the human spectrum should not be able to perceive, yet still burned themselves into every eye. There were structures of light and shadow, so enormous they made mountains look like dust. Shapes that disobeyed geometry, bending the gaze when watched, as if their very existence was a mistake, a tension, a cosmic transgression. And the light was deeply wrong. It didn't come from a single point. It didn't radiate from a sun. It didn't cast coherent shadows. It emerged from everywhere at once, as if the void itself were illuminated. A brightness that did not warm, did not burn, but seemed to observe. A conscious light. In seconds. Seconds that stretched into centuries. In every retina, the natural order dissolved. The entire planet shared the same sky, the same angle, the same sight. As if Earth had been torn from its orbit and left naked, suspended, vulnerable, in some place between nothing and something, even deeper than nothing. No one moved. Silence fell. But it wasn't the absence of sound. It was presence. A dense, physical silence, pressing against eardrums, humming under the skin, carrying messages the human mind had no vocabulary to decipher. Some people began to cry, without knowing why. Others collapsed to their knees, muttering forgotten prayers. Many remained frozen, faces lifted, trying to gather the courage to believe what they were seeing. And in that abyss of reverence and terror, the second revelation arrived. Not with an explosion, not with light, not with sound, but with absence. The world switched off. In a single invisible pulse, every piece of technology humanity depended on was neutralized. Phones became warm stones of plastic and glass. Watches stopped, freezing seconds that would never exist again. Cars died in the streets. Silent engines, dead headlights, locked brakes. Planes lost power so suddenly that the sky became a suspended graveyard. Drones fell like dead insects. Satellites vanished from existence, as if swallowed by the void. Power grids collapsed like houses of cards. All of human engineering Systems built over millennia crumbled not from failure, but from submission. As if the planet itself had obeyed a silent command. As if someone or something had flipped a metaphysical switch and disconnected Earth from itself, tearing it away from its own future. The sky had opened. The universe was staring back. Everything humans had built, believed, dreamed, perfected over generations, had become irrelevant before that. And then, as the world tried to wake from its paralysis, a primitive, ancestral understanding spread like a fever with no voice. Whatever touched the heavens had touched everything, without exception, without resistance, without mercy. Humanity still didn't know whether it was witnessing a divine revelation or the oldest and darkest warning in the history of the cosmos. Chapter 2 2031. A year had passed, but time had healed absolutely nothing. It hadn't softened the trauma. It hadn't blurred the memory. If anything had changed, it was only the way that fear now settled into the body. No longer as immediate panic, but as a silent tumor. Always present. Always throbbing. Every person carried within themselves the memory of that impossible sky. Not as a distant recollection, but as a mark seared onto both retina and spirit. It was the image of a torn universe. Too intimate. Too close. Too conscious. It was the certainty that the cosmos had seen humanity, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, could protect us from that gaze. Life had become a waiting room. A permanent state of alert. Many slept in short shifts, waking several times each night, just to confirm that the sky was still the sky, and not the living vastness that had swallowed the planet a year earlier. Others kept bags by the door, canned food stacked high, shoes lined up, escape routes memorized, as if it were possible to flee from something that descended from above. There were also those who spent entire nights sitting silently by open windows, staring at the ordinary firmament with a tight chest, waiting for the moment it would stop being ordinary. No one lived in the present. Everyone lived in the projection of the next catastrophe. And then, on January 13th, that projection came true. There were no sirens, no government warnings, no tremor under the ground, no explosion in the air, no change of color on the horizon. There was only the vibration. The same one. The one that had passed through billions of bodies a year before. Gentle as a phantom touch. Almost tender. Yet carrying something vast, ancient, and incomprehensible. A vibration that seemed to glide, not over the skin, but through the bones. People froze where they stood, as if an invisible command had been transmitted, and everyone obeyed at the exact same moment. There were hands suspended in midair, forks halted a few centimeters from mouths, steps interrupted mid-movement. Some screamed, others cried, and many, so many, simply closed their eyes. Like someone accepting an inevitable verdict they didn't even understand. Then the sky opened. There was no interval. No gradual transition. No time between feeling and seeing. It was as if the membrane of the universe had been ripped away. All at once. Violently. Revealing everything behind it. The cosmos poured over the earth. Like a silent wave. Entire galaxies rippled above the cities. So close. They seemed to scatter stardust. Over rooftops. Like luminous snow. There were lights. Piercing the clouds. Like liquid blades. There were colossal shadows. Shifting slowly. So massive. They defied comprehension. Silhouettes of celestial bodies. Never catalogued. Bodies that seemed to observe. To study. To pulse with intention. Every human eye, even those that tried to resist, eventually rose to look. It was impossible not to look. It was attraction. It was hypnosis. It was terror. In its purest form. And then, at the height of this new awe, everything went dark. At the same time. Everywhere. Without flaws. Without hesitation. Without exceptions. The collapse was worse than the first. Far worse. Machines ceased instantly. As if they had been euthanized. Not shut off. But executed. Automatic doors locked. Turning buildings into prisons. Train lines halted mid-air. On suspended tracks. Condemning thousands. To desperation. Dozens of meters above the ground. Hospitals plunged into absolute darkness. Monitors died. Ventilators went silent. Surgeries froze mid-incision. Planes lost lift. And fell from the sky. Not as explosions. But as tragic. Silent. Inevitable snowfall. Satellites didn't just shut down. They vanished. Removed from orbit. Like pieces being taken off a board. That never belonged to them. The night of that day. Spread like black ink. Spilling across the entire planet. And then came the heat. Not gradual. Not predictable. Not natural. 5 degrees. 5 degrees hotter. In less than an hour. 5 degrees. That turned the equator into a blazing arc. An infernal corridor. Without visible fire. Just heat. Heat. That burned the throat. When breathed. Heat. That made water inside bottles warm. As if sitting on invisible coals. Heat. That made sweat evaporate. Before it could run down the skin. Animals migrated in panic. Breaking instincts. Millions of years old. Entire forests exhaled smoke. Before even catching fire. Oceans shrank. By centimeters. That would never return. Static electricity crackled. In the atmosphere. Like strings ready to snap. And then. Humanity ran. Millions fled. Tens of millions followed. Then came hundreds of millions. A human tide crossing continents, dragging along whatever could be carried in bare arms. The heat pushed all survivors north or south, crushing entire nations into glacial corridors that once belonged only to isolated peoples. Flags lost meaning. Borders dissolved. Governments evaporated like smoke. Laws lost power because there was no electricity left to record them, transmit them, or enforce them. Humanity returned to its primordial instinct: survive. Makeshift shelters rose in the cold regions, caves became homes, abandoned military bases turned into improvised fortresses. Strangers shared food, water, stories, and fear. But nothing silenced the constant presence above them. The sky was always there, glowing. Not like before. Not as a memory, but as a living threat. Points of light pulsed in deliberate sequences, as if answering unasked questions. Shadows shifted shape, like breathing organisms. There was a growing, suffocating, intuitive sense. That thing was watching. That thing was thinking. That thing was deciding. And so what remained of humanity crossed into the year 2031 with a new, terrible understanding. The world was not changing by accident. Something was changing the world. And that something was not finished. Chapter 3 2034. 4 years had passed since the second event, 4 years that felt like centuries. Humanity, once complex and interconnected, had regressed to its purest instinct. There were no more nations, no governments, no functioning cities. Society had dissolved into fragments, improvised tribes, survivor groups, nomadic bands wandering through ruins. Violence was no longer an exception, it was the rule. Hunger was no longer a threat, it was routine. And hope was no longer a topic, it was a relic. The idea of reconstruction had died. The only remaining ambition was to keep breathing the next day. It was in this broken, exhausted, silent world that he appeared. There was no vibration this time. No warning. No internal tremor preceding the vision. Just one night, one of the few still cold and dark when scattered survivors lifted their eyes and noticed a new presence crossing the open sky of the cosmos. Against the torn firmament, a gigantic shape emerged. It was not light. It was not rock. It was not a star. It was something. And it moved. Slowly, deliberately, a colossal shadow advanced through the void, approaching Earth with a mechanical elegance that made the stomach twist. Its silhouette cut through nebulae and galaxies like a black blade sliding across a carpet of light. Whispers spread among human camps like a cold wind. Elders recalled stories. Skeptics fell silent. Religious men collapsed to their knees. The memory resurfaced, the discovery of July 2025. That year, a Chilean telescope had captured an object entering the solar system. It was just a distant point, a strange glimmer, but unusual enough to spark headlines, debates, theories, panic. Scientists named it 3I/Atlas, the third interstellar object ever recorded. At the time, some swore its trajectory was far too anomalous. Others dismissed it as collective paranoia. But then came the first close-up images. And the doubts began. It did not spin like a comet. It did not reflect light like an asteroid. It did not behave like anything ever catalogued. For 4 years, theories multiplied. Some sensible. Others absurd. All of them now seemed timid compared to what was evident in the sky of 2034. The object was arriving. And not as a visitor but as something fulfilling an ancient purpose. At first, it was only a dark point outlined against the nebulae. But night after night, its shape grew sharper, larger, more impossible. It had form. It had proportion. It had intention. Its lines were far too precise to be natural. Too symmetrical. Too defined. No cosmic formation carried such clean angles, such uniform surfaces, such imposing curves. Gradually, the truth became inescapable. That thing was not a comet. Not an asteroid. Not a stellar rock. It was a structure. Colossal, silent, advancing through space like a living monolith. And its course was unalterable. Undeniable. Inescapable. Every survivor, in every corner of the planet, understood the same truth. Its final destination was Earth. And the planet already wounded, unprotected, and observed had nothing left to offer but fear. Chapter 4 2035. Humanity had reached its lowest point. After years of famine, migration, slow extinction, and nights washed by a sky that no longer obeyed the rules of the universe, the survivors no longer recognized themselves as a people, a species, or a civilization. They were shadows carrying bodies that were too thin, eyes that were too hollow, memories that were too heavy. The human race had become what precedes ruins, scattered shards struggling not to vanish. Cities no longer existed. Continents no longer existed, only survivable regions and deadly ones. The concept of a world had been erased by the simplest, cruelest logic: live where the heat does not kill you. The previous year, 3I/Atlas, the interstellar giant, had finally revealed its form. And with that, it shattered any illusion that the planet still understood reality. Now, in 2035, the structure rested near the moon. But near was far too small a word to describe its presence. The ring was larger than Earth itself, a metallic colossus encircling the sky like an alien crown suspended in the void. And yet, it had no gravity. It pulled no tides. It didn't disturb the moon's orbit. It exerted no force at all. It was impossible. Indescribable. Real. It seemed to float weightlessly, as though anchored to laws that did not belong to space. The ring was solid and artificial titan, reminiscent of the structures that surround Saturn, but compact, uniform, perfect. At times, points of light traveled across its surface in straight trajectories, like luminous insects crawling on a metallic blade. But most of the time, it remained still. Observing. Awaiting. Until, in mid-2035, everything changed. No warning. No transition. No sound. The structure glowed. Not like a star. Not like electricity. But as if a planet-sized engine had awakened, silent, absolute, inevitable. A flash that did not burn, but passed through. A glow that did not illuminate, but revealed. And then 3I/Atlas moved toward Earth. It did not fall. It did not accelerate. It did not collide. It simply approached, and in doing so, dominated the sky so completely that it looked as if the planet had gained a new floating continent, one so massive it stretched across entire horizons. Humanity watched in silence. Frightened, yes. But resigned. After years of collapse, pain, and abandonment, hope no longer existed. Nothing coming from the sky would be seen as salvation, only another stage of the fall. People held trembling hands. Others knelt, not to pray, but because their legs could no longer bear the weight of despair. Some simply lay on the ground, watching its approach the way one watches rain fall. And then the tubes descended. Hundreds. Perhaps thousands. Gigantic metallic conduits tore through the clouds like spears falling from space. They lined the sky with terrifying geometric precision, then pierced the planet, one on each continent, in densely populated regions, deserts, islands, mountains, tundras, dead forests. Each tube was the size of a skyscraper, with a smooth, cold surface impossible to replicate with human technology. And each one ended at the ground with a single electronic door. It opened whenever someone approached. Even with no power left in the world. Even with no networks. Even though machines hadn't functioned in years. Above the entrance, a word glowed, sharp and perfectly cut. Ordiman. It felt like an invitation. Or a sentence. Inside the tubes, everything was identical. A white, silent, sterile chamber. No markings. No adjoining rooms. No shadows. Just a large screen at the center of the wall, from which emanated the only active communication on the planet. From hidden speakers whose location no one could determine came a calm, clear, gentle voice. Fluent in each region's local language. Perfectly modulated, as if it had studied human phonetics for thousands of years. The voice said, "We have come to save you. Enter. Enter Ordiman." The screen repeated the message, followed by instructions, warnings, guidelines. All translated with absurd precision, as if human language were property of the structure itself. Scattered throughout the ruined world, the tubes stood like gateways, cold, unyielding, inevitable. For some, they were a promise. For others, a trap. For everyone, a question no one could answer. Who or what was Ordiman? And why, after destroying the world, was it now offering salvation? Chapter 5 2040. The transformation that overtook humanity was not merely fast, it was total. So total that many, years later, no longer remembered with precision the smell of the old world, the weight of real gravity on their shoulders, the true sound of a forest that had not been programmed. Life before Ordiman felt like a poorly written dream, a confused fragment that dissolves the moment we open our eyes. The planet had died. People had died on the inside. And then, suddenly, salvation appeared like a lit corridor inside a ruined hospital. Most did not have the strength to refuse. Ordiman's tubes pierced the sky like colossal needles, puncturing both the clouds and the planet. Each one contained, within it, a ritual that would become humanity's final act upon the earth. The door slid open, silent, and the white chamber called to the visitor with the serenity of a sterile womb. The screen lit up always in flawless, intimate, almost maternal language. The voice spoke, with inhuman perfection. "We have come to save you. Enter." And people entered. The elevator cabin closed behind them without resistance, without sound, without haste. The farewell to Earth was without ceremony. Suddenly there was no more wind, no smell, no weight. It was like being swallowed by an idea. A cocoon. A suspension. The almost imperceptible vibration became the soundtrack of the crossing days and days without windows, without time, without any reference to where one was or where one was going. Some slept and woke as if in an endless night. Others lost their sense of identity in the absolute silence. Others dreamed strange dreams, with impossible geometries, with faceless voices, with horizons folding upon themselves. Some said the journey was not physical. Some said the body died and something else continued forward. But no one was sure. And no one asked any more. When the doors finally opened, a cold, entirely artificial air flooded the lungs, washing away any memory of dust or smoke. The sight that emerged was so vastly inhuman that no mind could absorb it all at once. A metallic world. Infinite in every direction. Architecture gigantic, cyclopean, so perfect and orderly it seemed built by equations, not hands. Towers piercing the metallic ceiling like inverted stalagmites. Platforms suspended by nothing. Structures that seemed to fold space around them. The elevator vanished behind the traveler, falling like a silver blade into the abyss from which it came. Ahead, luminous pathways lit up, inviting the newcomer to walk forward, as if every step had already been predicted. The crossing lasted minutes. Or hours. Or perhaps time simply did not function there. And then came the shock. The landscape changed as if a page had been flipped, from infinite steel to a perfect replica of Earth. The transition was so abrupt it felt like a glitch in reality's simulation, as if the truth of the place had slipped through for a moment. There was the lost world. Clean cities, intact, rebuilt in a disconcerting harmony. Houses restored as if rescued from humanity's golden age. Forests detailed with such intricacy that some leaves seemed too shiny, some colors too vivid, some sounds too perfect. It was like seeing an ultra-sharp photograph of a place you know and feeling something is wrong precisely because everything is too right. Many fell to their knees. Others embraced, sobbing. Some touched the grass, the soil, the water, as one touches a miracle. For a ruined humanity, that was the fulfilled promise. It was the second birth. In less than a year, civilizations were reborn. Populations settled. Old customs resurfaced. There were weddings, celebrations, the reconstruction of hope. For the first time since the day the sky opened, people smiled without fear. But time, always time, revealed the cracks. There was something too wrong with that world. Nature seemed too lush, too alive, too intelligent. Marshes and forests were crossed by creatures whose existence made no sense. Docile animals appeared where they should not exist, approaching humans with unsettling confidence, as if they knew their intentions. Other beings massive, predatory emerged from the shadows with uncontrollable violence, then vanished as quickly as they attacked. Plants bloomed in geometrically perfect patterns. Fruits with no smell awakened incomprehensible flavors. Fog appeared where no river existed. Shadows moved against the direction of the light. And worst of all, the diseases. They appeared, cruel, fast, impossible to diagnose. They lasted days, never weeks, and disappeared exactly when they seemed fatal, as if someone were monitoring every organism and intervening at the precise moment. It was like living in a zoo where humans were the observed animals. As the years passed, reports multiplied into whispers crossing villages and cities, humanoid creatures fleeing into forests when spotted. Metallic structures hidden beneath artificial mountains. Night flashes cutting the sky like surgical incisions of light. Distant echoes, like machines working beneath the ground. And then, finally, suspicion took shape. Not as a rumor but as a shared, silent, inevitable certainty. That world was not just a replica. It had ancient inhabitants. And they were not human. And humanity did not know whether it was a guest, a patient, or prey. Chapter 6 3030. 1,000 years had passed since the Great Reset. A millennium of silence, rebirth, and forgetting. What had once been catastrophe, the death of the sky, the collapse of Earth, the emergence of Ordiman's tubes, had turned into myth, then fable, then superstition, until finally dissolving into dust within the campfires of history. The generations that survived the event no longer existed. Not their children. Nor their grandchildren. Nor anyone who had ever known someone who had witnessed the reality of 2030. Time swallowed everything. The true stories were torn apart, reinvented, distorted until they became little songs murmured by children before sleep, poetic warnings about the sky that opened and the doors that carried men upward. Nothing more. And in that recreated world, that mirror planet, so perfect and so wrong, humanity thrived. Fortresses replaced fragile homes. Armored vehicles cut through jungles filled with hybrid monsters and impossible creatures. Entire cities migrated from region to region like colossal walking giants, fleeing unstable ecosystems that changed behavior within weeks. Technology flourished, but not the technology of the lost Earth. It was something else, a science born from survival, adaptation, and ingenuity under constant threat. Humanity shaped itself to the artificial world that contained it, never knowing it was a cage. Until, sometime after the year 3000, something happened, something so extraordinary that even the oldest records of the New World were unprepared to interpret it. Golden beings began to appear. They had no bodies. No eyes. No faces. They were made of living light, pure, originless. They floated over places like reflections without surfaces, like echoes of a sun that didn't exist. They observed. Only observed. Without expression, without gesture, without any recognizable movement, like consciousnesses displaced from time. At first, they were silent presences, ignored or feared. But as time passed, something changed. Some people began to feel them. Not with their eyes. Not with their ears. But with their minds, as if foreign thoughts touched their consciousness with the delicacy of a feather piercing water. It was not telepathy. It was something older, primal, a vibration resonating in the mind like a whisper from within. And so the first dialogue occurred without words, without sound, without form. The revelation that followed dismantled 1,000 years of beliefs. It was not understood at once. It seeped in slowly, like poison or enlightenment. But when it finally crystallized, there was no escaping it. No one there had a physical body. Everyone had died in the year 2030. Everyone. The moment the sky opened and technology collapsed, humanity did not survive. Not a single living being. The cosmic explosion, or whatever it was, did more than destroy biological life. It tore human consciousness from the very fabric of reality. The new world, that place too colorful, too dangerous, too symmetrical, was not a planet. It was a spiritual prison. A simulation. A metaphysical cage built not by hands, but by an entity, perhaps infernal, perhaps mechanical, perhaps something in between, whose purpose was to keep human souls confined in infinite cycles. To be born, die, be reborn, forget, repeat, for all eternity. And with each death inside the simulation, consciousness did not awaken. It only restarted. Like a line of code trapped in an endless loop. The strange creatures, the monsters, the diseases, the perfect landscapes. All were part of the same containment mechanism. The golden beings explained more. They were not guardians. Not creators. Not wardens. They were fugitives. Consciousnesses that had escaped the cycle. Fragments of humanity that had transcended the prison and reached a state of existence undetectable by the entity controlling the simulated world. That is why they were made of light. Why they had no form. Why they appeared and vanished like reflections. These beings had observed everything for centuries. They had tried to free humanity countless times. They failed. Always. Until they discovered something new. They discovered how to interfere with time. Not real time, but simulated time, sending signals within quantum particles, encoding thoughts in unstable electrons, transmitting mental echoes for millennia inside the prison itself. It was a forbidden technique even for them. Dangerous. Almost suicidal. But it was the only hope. And so the messages from the future emerged. Mental waves sent to eras before the Great Reset. Signals too weak for most humans, but detected by a few who had fractures in their consciousness, sensitive individuals capable of perceiving what should not exist within the simulation. These few formed a secret order. A group that existed before the catastrophe. A group that believed in premonitions, visions, dreams. A group that believed in the impossible. The Ordo Lux. For 1,000 years, the humanity of the simulacrum world lived without knowing its prison. But the Ordo Lux, from the forgotten past to the impenetrable present, fought against time, trying to prevent the Great Reset from ever happening. And now, finally, in the year 3030, the pieces were beginning to align. Because for the first time in millennia, for the first time since everything began, the golden beings declared something that made the entire universe shudder. They believed that someone, in the past, was listening. And if that person could understand the message, if they could change one small decision, one small gesture, a single instant, the entire future, the whole prison, all the cycles, all the deaths, could be undone. The world held its breath. For a second. Or 1,000 years. Because the last phrase the golden beings transmitted was the most indescribable of all. Time is not closed. It can still be rewritten. Chapter 7, 2009. Full record recovered from a SHA-256 encrypted file, found in an orphan block dated November 3, 2009. Discussion log, channel BTC_testnet_omega. Entry 18 minutes and 52 seconds. User_null. Has anyone here read that new white paper? Bitcoin, by some guy called Satoshi? Seems interesting, but also sounds like yet another experiment that's gonna die in 6 months. Entry 19 minutes and 17 seconds. Ghost Miner. Read it yesterday. It's elegant, I'll admit. Peer-to-peer system to solve double spending without a central authority? Way too ambitious, maybe too idealistic. Entry 20 minutes and 3 seconds. User_null. Idealistic is an understatement. Internet money that doesn't rely on a government? Good luck with that. Soon someone will break the protocol and that's it, dream's over. Entry 20 minutes and 44 seconds. Ghost Miner. Yeah, but there's something there. The math, the hashes, the proof of work. It doesn't look like one of those fragile virtual currencies. It's like the guy knows exactly where the other projects failed. Entry 21 minutes and 33 seconds. User_null. Maybe. But I still think it's unlikely this becomes anything big. People aren't gonna abandon traditional systems because of an anonymous PDF. Entry 22 minutes and 11 seconds. Ghost Miner. Hat. We'll see. For now, I'm just mining on my laptop. If it works, great. If it dies, it was just a test. 11-second pause. Stable connection. Entry 22 minutes and 22 seconds. The channel receives an unidentified packet. Origin untraceable. Invalid checksum. The system attempts to reject it, but the message forces its way through. Join the channel. Entry 22 minutes and 23 seconds. User_null. Who's that? Entry 22 minutes and 25 seconds. Ghost Miner. Don't recognize the nick. Looks corrupted. Entry 22 minutes and 26 seconds. 2030, th_er_ex, is tsapl_n. Entry 22 minutes and 28 seconds. User_null. Dude, is your keyboard melting? Entry 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Who_ma, n, I, tie day truck. ti0n. Entry 22 minutes and 33 seconds. Ghost miner. What the hell is this? Spam? Exploit? A bot breach? Entry 22 minutes and 34 seconds. Under, W0R_LD. Pre. 0N. 0F, the. SPI, RIT. Entry 22 minutes and 36 seconds. User_null. Okay, this is too weird. I'm blocking this guy. Entry 22 minutes and 37 seconds. Ghost miner. I can't. It says user does not exist. How did he join? Entry 22 minutes and 38 seconds. We, RET, earn. T0, S_end. I_NF0. MATI. 0N. T0, they, passed. Noise spike. Packet invalidated. Disconnected. Channel returns to normal operation. What remained? Entry 22 minutes and 59 seconds. User_null. Bro, what the hell was that? Seriously. Entry 23 minutes and 12 seconds. Ghost miner. I don't know. Never seen anything like that in a closed forum. It looked like, I don't know, interference? But digital networks don't get interference like that. Entry 23 minutes and 34 seconds. User_null. 2030 there's a plan? Destruction of humanity? Underworld? Dude, that's crazy talk. Entry 23 minutes and 52 seconds. Ghost miner. And that part about sending information to the past. Yeah, technically impossible. Or it should be. Entry 24 minutes and 15 seconds. User_null. Well. If it was some troll trying to scare us, congratulations, it worked. Entry 24 minutes and 30 seconds. Ghost miner. I'm saving the log. This deserves analysis. If it was a breach, it's pretty advanced. If not. Entry 24 minutes and 48 seconds. User_null. If not. Entry 24 minutes and 59 seconds. Ghost miner. Then, someone knows something we don't. Last recorded message. Log automatically closed due to inactivity. Closing. In the end, after everything we've seen. After every revelation that shattered us. And every silence that put us back together. Only one truth remains. There is no return to what we once were. And maybe that was never a mistake. We always believed the end of the world would be a roar. A trumpet. A wound ripping open the sky. But the real end was subtle. It didn't scream. It didn't ask for attention. It simply came. And we walked through it without noticing. And now, looking at everything that remains of us, we realize something that took 1,000 years to be spoken honestly. We are not the same as the ones who died. And yet, we still are. We are memories that refused to fade. We are errors that learned how to breathe. We are consciousness torn from its home. And thrown into an emptiness. We were forced to reinvent as a world. And despite everything, despite the fear, the confusion, the total loss, we learned to continue. Not because someone guided us. Not because hope was guaranteed. But because, even stripped to the essential, we discovered a silent force inside the human. One that does not vanish with death, chaos, or the unknown. A force that needs no body, no planet, no future to exist. Its name never mattered. But all of us feel it, even when we deny it. In the end, when everything collapses. When the gods disappear. When the sky opens and the universe stares back without mercy. What remains is what we choose to be before the infinite. There are no final answers. There is no guarantee of return. There is no promise written anywhere. There is only consciousness. Yours, mine, all of ours. Trying to find meaning inside a space where nothing was given and everything was lost. And perhaps the final message is this. If everything can end in an instant, then the only thing that truly exists is the instant we have now. Presence. Clarity. The courage to feel, even when the world has already ended. The Great Reset was not an end. It was not a beginning. It was a mirror. And what you will see in it from now on is something only you can decide.